On Friday the 7th of April in 2023, a 30-year-old woman from Detroit named Shanika Brewer was last seen leaving her friend's home on Sheridan Street when she would mysteriously disappear, never to be seen again. That morning, Shanika had been acting her usual self and even had a quick conversation with a close friend, who claimed that she seemed upbeat with no signs of distress or trouble. Yet as the hours wore on, her loved ones began to feel a gnawing sense of unease when her phone suddenly fell silent. Calls went unanswered, messages left unread, and as the days slowly ticked by, that nagging feeling of unease had turned into outright panic. So, around 2 weeks later, Shanika's family then decided to contact the authorities to plead for help. But as the investigators pieced together the timeline, they discovered some troubling information that only deepened their concern. Shanika's movements after leaving her friend's home were unclear, and those closest to her offered vague and inconsistent accounts of her plans, where they mentioned how she may have been in contact with her ex-boyfriend, who was abusive in the past. So, in an attempt to find the missing woman, search teams were quickly assembled to scour the local Detroit neighborhoods and nearby parks, and during these searches a few potential clues were found. But unfortunately, their efforts ultimately yielded no significant leads, eventually causing the case to turn cold. So, almost 2 years on from her disappearance, Shanika's case remains an agonizing mystery, leaving her family with many unanswered questions as they are only left to wonder what really happened to Shanika Brewer, and who could be responsible. Shanika Monique Brewer was born in 1993 in Detroit, Michigan, where she grew up surrounded by a family that adored her and a community that cherished her vibrant spirit. Known for her infectious laugh and kind heart, Shanika was a young woman who left an impression on everyone she met. Whether it was her warm smile or her unyielding loyalty, she had a way of making people feel seen and valued. To Shanika, family wasn't just important, it was everything. Her mother Deborah often described Shanika as a deeply devoted daughter and sister, always willing to go the extra mile to support her loved ones. She also had a soft spot for children, especially her nieces and nephews, whom she doted on like they were her own. In her family's eyes, she was a cornerstone of strength and love, the one they could always count on through thick and thin. But beyond her role with the family, Shanika had an adventurous and creative side that made her truly one of a kind. She was passionate about fashion and self-expression, often experimenting with bold colours and unique styles that reflected her lively personality. Her friends would fondly recall how she could turn even the dullest day into an exciting adventure. However, Shanika's life wasn't without its struggles, as she was eventually diagnosed with schizophrenia and bipolar disorder, meaning every day was a new challenge that she had to face. But despite her issues, Shanika always made sure to meet each day with resilience, leaning on her faith and the support of those who loved her. So, by early 2023, Shanika was making plans to embrace the next chapter of her life. Whether it was reconnecting with old friends or focusing on her health, she seemed poised for a fresh start, with her optimistic outlook shining through even during difficult times. However, Shanika's plans and dreams would unfortunately come to an abrupt halt when she would mysteriously disappear on that fateful day in 2023. On Friday the 7th of April, the 30-year-old woman left her friend's home on Sheridan Street in Detroit, Michigan on what appeared to be a typical spring morning as she was planning to run some errands. In the moments before she left, Shanika had been acting her usual self, calm, cheerful, and focused on her plans for the day. Nothing about her demeanour raised any red flags, so at the time there was no cause for concern. However, as the day went on, Shanika's family and friends began to notice something unusual, as phone calls would continue to go unanswered and texts were left unread. For someone as close to her family as Shanika, this was very out of character, so as this behaviour spread into the next morning, concern began to grow. One family member, unable to shake the feeling that something was wrong, decided to visit Shanika's last known location. But when they arrived and began asking questions, the responses they received were vague and unsettling. So, with no concrete information to go on, Shanika's loved ones left that meeting with more questions than answers, with the uneasy feeling that something terrible may have happened. But as days turned into weeks, with the situation failing to improve, Shanika's family were then forced to face the grim realization that she could have been in serious danger. So with nowhere else to turn, they then decided to report her as missing to the local police, with hopes that she would be found before it was too late. On Monday the 24th of April, the Detroit Police Department received a desperate call from Shanika Brewer's family, who were frantic with worry after not hearing from her for almost 2 weeks. After all, Shanika, who was a loving daughter and a familiar presence in her community, had vanished without explanation, leaving her family to fear the worst. So, responding to their pleas for help, detectives immediately launched a missing person case and began piecing together the final hours before her disappearance. Investigators questioned friends, family members and neighbours, hoping to uncover a clue that could lead them to Shanika. And it was during these inquiries that a chilling discovery came to light, as they were informed of Shanika's tendency to post on social media, which for the past 2 weeks had been completely silent, as if she had vanished into thin air. This revelation then sent shockwaves throughout her family, as they knew that this meant something troubling had occurred. So in response, the police increased their efforts by sending out search teams to the area she was last seen. But despite these early developments, the case quickly grew more troubling, as search efforts yielded no significant leads. Shanika's family were then forced to pour their energy into raising awareness, organising community vigils and online campaigns to help keep her name in the public eye. However, as time passed, the investigation stalled, leaving them to grapple with the painful possibility that Shanika's case could turn cold if they were unable to raise its profile. But just as things started to turn bleak, a certain media outlet stepped in at a vital time to provide their assistance in the search, where they would reveal a crucial detail that added an extra layer of worry to this already concerning case. On Tuesday the 25th of April, approximately 18 days after Shanika Brewer was last seen, CBS News Detroit would step in to help spread awareness of the case by sharing her details in a prompt news article, explaining how the missing young woman was potentially in grave danger, as not only had she been missing for over 2 weeks, but she also suffered from schizophrenia and bipolar disorder, meaning that her disappearance could be fatal if she wasn't found soon. However, the initial delays in these searches created a great deal of distress within Shanika's family, as they realised that vital time had already been wasted. So, alongside the police and the media, Shanika's family increased their efforts to spread awareness, hoping to use this positive momentum to their advantage and locate the missing young woman. But as months passed, with no breakthroughs, Shanika's case remained unsolved. There was one tip that eventually came forward, which alluded to the fact that Shanika may have been in contact with her abusive ex-boyfriend in the days leading up to her disappearance, which understandably sparked theories of potential foul play. But it would seem that despite their relentless efforts to raise awareness and appeal to the public, every single promising lead would eventually fizzle out, and in turn, the investigation stalled, leaving Shanika's family trapped in a painful limbo of frustration and regret, as they remained desperate for answers but no closer to finding them. So, unfortunately, 20 months on from that fateful day, Shanika Brewer remains a missing person, leaving her family devastated as they are left with no choice but to continue their fight for justice. Now, unfortunately, as far as the official investigation goes, this is all we know for now. Despite the tireless efforts of law enforcement and the countless questions surrounding Shanika's sudden and baffling disappearance, answers remain heartbreakingly out of reach. But in the face of these grim circumstances, Shanika's family refuses to give up. They remain unwavering in their dedication to finding the truth, holding on to the hope that someone somewhere holds the key to unravelling this mystery. However, given that Shanika Brewer has now been missing for almost 2 years, alongside the incredibly worrying details of her case, I can't help but feel that the likelihood of her safe return is only growing weaker as the time passes. So with that, let's get into some of the potential theories. Now, before we delve into the potential theories surrounding Shanika's disappearance, it's crucial to acknowledge the profound pain and uncertainty her family has endured throughout this entire ordeal. Out of respect for them, we must approach these possibilities with empathy and sensitivity, which is why the theories discussed here will be grounded in statements made by Shanika's loved ones and the observations of law enforcement. It's also important to note that while some theories may appear more plausible than others, they can only remain speculative until concrete evidence surfaces to reveal what truly happened to Shanika. So with that in mind, one of the most prominent theories that has emerged amongst the public is the possibility of foul play, possibly even involving someone close to her. From the very beginning, Shanika's family has emphasized that her disappearance is entirely out of character. Her loved ones describe her as someone who would never willingly vanish without explanation. This theory is further supported by a comment made by one of Shanika's friends, who mentioned that just a few days before her disappearance, she had been in contact with an ex-boyfriend who was abusive towards her in the past. Adding to these suspicions are the reports of uncooperative behaviour from individuals who may have been some of the last people to see Shanika. Their reluctance to share information has only deepened the mystery, leaving her family to wonder if someone close to Shanika may have had motive to harm her. Another possibility being considered is that Shanika could have been the victim of a random act of violence or abduction. Detroit, like many urban areas, has its share of crime, so it's conceivable that Shanika unknowingly crossed paths with someone who meant her harm. However, the lack of witnesses or physical evidence makes this scenario difficult to confirm, as cases involving stranger abductions often leave few tangible clues. But for argument's sake, if we continue to head down the rabbit hole of this theory, what if this wasn't just a random act of violence, but rather a coordinated attack with only one specific purpose? Now, just before diving into this particular theory, I first want to emphasize that Shanika Brewer's family has not indicated that they believe it to be likely. However, due to the increasing prevalence of human trafficking in major cities like Detroit and its surrounding areas, I feel it's important to address this possibility as part of a broader discussion about the dangers women face in today's society. So, given Detroit's status as a hub for trafficking activity due to its proximity to international borders and major transit routes, some have speculated that Shanika may have been targeted by traffickers. After all, cases of trafficking often involve sudden and unexplained disappearances, where the victim leaves behind few or no immediate clues. Supporting this theory is the lack of witnesses or clear evidence in Shanika's disappearance, which aligns with patterns seen in proven human trafficking cases. These crimes are often orchestrated in ways that minimize exposure, making it difficult for law enforcement to gather concrete leads. The fact that Shanika's case remains unsolved after all this time only deepens the fear that she may have been caught in a network designed to evade detection. That said, there is no direct evidence to substantiate this theory at this time, and law enforcement has not publicly pursued human trafficking as a primary angle in Shanika's case, at least according to media sources. So without credible sightings or reports linking her to specific trafficking scenarios, this can only remain a speculative idea at best. In my personal opinion, based solely on the information currently available, the theory of foul play involving individuals in Shanika's inner circle seems much more likely. The suspicious mention of her ex-boyfriend, combined with the lack of action during the initial stages of her disappearance, points to a more localized explanation. After all, if somebody was responsible for this, they would have had 18 days to cover their tracks before the police started looking into the case, which would have been more than enough time to ensure their evasion. So while the possibility of human trafficking cannot be completely ruled out, the absence of any concrete evidence means we have to continue looking at every possible angle before we make any snap judgments. So with this in mind, if foul play isn't to blame for Shanika's sudden disappearance, then what is? Well, although Shanika's family have firmly pushed back against this idea, investigators haven't ruled out the possibility that she may have voluntarily walked away from her life. This theory, as unsettling as it may sound, tends to surface in cases where concrete evidence of foul play is absent. A question which may be worth asking is, could Shanika have been dealing with pressures or circumstances that her family and friends weren't fully aware of? Perhaps there were stresses, threats, or even emotional struggles that she kept hidden at the time. However, this idea comes up against one significant contradiction, being Shanika's deep connection to her family. Her loved ones have described her as a caring and devoted person who wouldn't simply abandon them, especially without a word of explanation. They insist that she had no history of wanting to leave or signs of planning such an escape, which makes this theory feel inconsistent with the Shanika they knew. It's also crucial to mention that there's no hard evidence supporting the idea of a voluntary departure. While investigators can't completely rule it out, the theory begins to feel more like a way of filling in the gaps when concrete answers are missing. But if Shanika didn't leave on her own accord, another possibility is that she may have been involved in an accident that tragically resulted in her death, and that someone, perhaps out of panic or fear, chose to cover it up. Concealing an accidental death might sound extreme, but it happens more often than you'd think. Perhaps something happened while she was meeting up with her ex-boyfriend, and after accidentally taking her life, he had no choice but to cover it up. But once again, this is nothing more than speculation, so we have to be careful about how serious we take these theories. After all, Shanika's ex-boyfriend could be completely innocent in this, and the mention of his abuse could also be fabricated, at least as far as we're aware. So without any answers, we are only left to wonder, what really happened to Shanika Brewer? And could there be a piece of evidence that is still out there which may just hold the key to solving this tragedy? Anyway, on that note, I think I'll leave this video here. But as always, if you have any other theories of your own which you think may help explain what really happened to Shanika Brewer, please leave your ideas in the comments down below and I'll do my best to get back to you. But until next time, thank you so much for watching and make sure to subscribe to the channel for updates on these stories. Also, if you found this story interesting, feel free to check out the playlist on screen now, which covers the many other cases of young black women who continue to go missing in recent years.